Good deal. Well, welcome everyone. This is the Introduction to Commercial Energy Efficiency Financing, another part of the IAMU Energy Services webinar series. Super excited to have Ross Rita with us here today. He is the director at LED.Finance, a company that helps with commercial financing. Ross is an associate member of IAMU. He comes to us with over 30 years of experience in the commercial finance space. And he's here to talk to us today about, some financing options that are available to customers when it comes to energy efficiency projects. And, before I kick it over to Ross, I'll go ahead and put in my 2 cents here on this topic. As we were developing this webinar, someone asked me, why do our members need to hear about this? And my answer to them would be to fall back on my experience in private industry. I used to work for a company that did compressed air audits and sold lighting projects. And we partnered with a company to provide financing options directly on quotes. And it was incredibly beneficial to us. We were closing more sales, and it kind of opened up that conversation with the finance folks at the different companies we were selling to consider efficiency projects as OPEX versus CAPEX. And so Ross is going to get into that. Like I said, Ross has 30 years of experience in this space. He's really knowledgeable when it comes to these topics, and super excited to have you here, Ross. With that, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Very happy to have become an associate member of the IAMU. Excited about what we can do for the utility members and the associate members. And just to expand on the background a little bit, we've really financed everything from software to flight simulators in our, starting in the early 90s. And got introduced to the energy space coming out of the Great Recession as a way to brand our company as environmentally oriented green type of equipment leasing company. And we actually started in 2011 looking at commercial solar deals back when solar was $6.50 a watt, and it was super hard to make any deals make sense. But we started a program within the Lighting Trade Ally division of the Energy Trust of Oregon, because we were in Portland at that time. And we had some good uptake from folks in the trade allies who were willing to adjust the way they presented their business proposition to the customer. And I've learned a lot since then, but you can go ahead on to the next slide, because I think the one term that I heard the most, and still hear actually I heard it this morning, is this deal is a no-brainer. Well, yeah, you would think so. However, the number one thing that kills a no-brainer deal is the fact that a customer has to write a check. And the fact of the matter is that CapEx is typically energy projects don't typically compete well for core business CapEx dollars. So it would have to be out of discretionary funds, or if very few companies, especially in the small to medium business segment, are funded or have projects that are earmarked or capital earmarked for projects. So what I learned from the trade allies is that, or the lighting guys, that I was working with in Portland, is that they were running into the same, objections that are guys that were selling any other type of equipment. There's no difference in selling an energy project. It's just that the economic proposition is a little bit different. So for example, let's say I'm financing a truck or a machine tool. You can say, this truck is going to make you X amount per mile, or this machine tool is going to create so many widgets that have this value. So it's a revenue proposition versus a savings proposition. And what you're asking the customer to do most generally in an energy efficiency project is invest in the project up front, and you'll get your money back over 3 years or whatever the payback is. Well, that was tough enough prior to COVID. And when COVID hit, we found that most small to medium sized businesses are really sitting on their cash, and it's tough to get them to spend money because of the uncertainty of the business climate. So that's kind of the introduction and the setup. Jeff, if you want to go ahead and advance the slide, we'll kind of dive into it a little bit more. So when I first started, I dug into there. Johnson Controls has a think tank called the Institute for Building Efficiency. And they did, well, they used to, it's unfunded now, but they used to do a bunch of surveys among larger companies. But, resoundingly, the results were the reason that they didn't move forward was lack of funding. And we've seen that where we have even large companies that have sustainability goals in their annual statements, and they want to be green, but the fact of the matter is that most large companies don't move forward on projects because of lack of budget. Think about how that works with small to medium sized businesses, right? They're not budgeted or funded for energy projects either. It's just something that they have to have, a presentation that makes sense. And we think that actually uncertainty of savings is probably, that's diminished now because the data, especially with LED lighting and other measures, the data supports it. Utility data, supports it. LED is now a very well developed technology where you don't have that uncertainty. And ROI, typically it's almost irrelevant in the small to medium business segment. It is relevant with larger business who have a 24-month ROI hurdle for CapEx projects. So, this is what the data said back then. I think it's probably still true with lack of funding, probably less as far as uncertainty of savings. So, Jeff, go ahead and advance the slide. So, why a finance strategy makes sense? I think when we first got started, the Energy Trust of Oregon's lighting tool summary page, the first thing the customer saw was the total project cost. That's the first number the customer saw. And a lot of them just they didn't even look at what the rebate was, what the net project cost, what the payback and all that. Because when you present a customer with the first number they see is the total project cost, if they don't have $100,000, laying around of discretionary capital, you've created a sticker shock kind of a emotional shutdown situation. So what we advocated was that we turn that summary upside down so that the first number the customer would see is the amount of energy savings and maintenance savings that were generated by the project. The second number they would see is a smaller number that represented a monthly payment and then a net monthly savings. And then we did a 10-year cash flow spread that was very simple and that nothing, again, we're talking about busy business owners who don't have time to analyze a 35-page technical proposal from an engineer, right? Most of these guys are not engineers, they're busy business owners. So we ran with that and we said, look, with no cost to the customer, here's what the savings proposition would look like, and refocus that whole sales conversation to the smallest number possible, right? Which would be a monthly payment. In the Energy Trust case, it was after the rebate. So the contractor was taking the rebate. We were financing the net project cost, although we can and do finance gross project cost and let the customer keep the rebate. That's not an issue. So again, Jeff, you mentioned repositioning this from a CapEx sale to an OpEx sale and letting the project create the savings or the dollars, to pay for the monthly payment. And again, kind of transforming this sales conversation from a technical standpoint to a cash flow conversation with the customer. In other words, reduce your expenses, improve the facility, pay for the project through savings. Very, very simple, and really no need to overcomplicate it unless you're working with a very financially sophisticated customer who is looking for a financially sophisticated solution to their situation. I think the key, Jeff and I were talking about this earlier this week. One of the best things about a finance program is that you can address underserved markets. By that I mean small businesses. I'm telling you, if you've not been a small business owner, I can tell you it's all about cash flow. You got to have funds coming in to keep those funds going out. And there's always cash flow challenges for small to medium-sized businesses. There's certain segments like multifamily and nonprofits. They have more of a fixed income. If you're familiar with multifamily, sum of rents is your fixed income. Okay, you can't go sell more doors than what you have. Nonprofits are typically funded by grants and donations, so it's difficult to, create capital or create revenue in a nonprofit. So if nothing else, a finance program is very effective in creating projects in these traditionally underserved markets or vertical markets that, like we had a really interesting opportunity on the East Coast with senior living facilities back here a few years ago, where these were kind of closely held multi-location nursing home facilities that were more they owned the real estate. They were very focused on how to improve their overall operational budget, right, from a utility expense. Go ahead and advance, Jeff.
Yep.
Did you have a comment on that, Jeff?
No, not really. I just think that, I would piggyback on what you were talking about with OpEx versus CapEx. Some of these companies that we used to sell projects to in my past career, our sales guys would go back and forth with their team. It would be some long sales cycles, right? Multi-month, sometimes even multi-year. And a lot of times it was about getting to the right person, the right decision maker. And many times with our larger projects, it ended up being the finance guys at that company, right? And so we would have this long back and forth, debating over the cost of, tiny materials, things like this. And we eventually get to the finance guys and they'll be like, hey, if you can hit this minimum internal rate of return, it's a done deal tomorrow. And so I would just really stress that importance of presenting projects as operational expenses versus capital, expenditures. So it's important, it's valuable, and it can make these projects happen. And a lot of our utilities are focused on hitting certain efficiency goals, hitting certain project goals, and financing. It may seem like an obvious thing, but unless it's on the quote, I think that financing can be forgotten about. So it's important to bring that to the forefront in these sales cycles. I'll move on to the next slide and stop talking.
So again, simplification, I think, is critical. If the industry was at a 75-80% close rate on proposals, there would be, I wouldn't have an argument here, but I think industry average is somewhere between 8 and 15%.
Yep.
I think that's the industry average. I think there are some guys who tell me that they're closing 50% of their projects, and I'm like, man, you must have a silver bullet. But I think reality is that I think I'm safe to say is that 80% of proposed projects go unclosed. I think that's a fair statement. And I think by adjusting the presentation to the customer and leading, this is the key. Don't assume that they have cash. Lead with assume that they do not have cash and lead with a no cost upfront project with, look, no doubt what we started promoting when COVID hit March of last year, we launched no down payment, $29 a month for the first 3 months so that the customer wouldn't have a full payment until the fourth month. And yeah, we give a chance for everybody to get paid, get the project installed, everybody happy. Customers paying 29 bucks a month, no skin off their nose. And that was really, that stuck around because it was seemed like the sales folks that we work with were very comfortable saying, hey, it's no down payment, 29 bucks a month, so that we can get the project going and that you can start seeing some energy savings before you start making your first monthly payment. There's a number of different ways to promote this, but the key is eliminate the upfront cost for the customer and let the savings pay for the project. Second biggest thing here is that I've learned, and by the way, this is, going on 10 years of primarily focused in the energy space, we got to keep it simple because it astonished me when I first saw a simple lighting retrofit proposal. I'm like, oh my, you're expecting a busy business owner to really analyze this at 30 pages or whatever it is with photometrics and all the stuff that's interesting to the facilities guy, but not necessarily to the economic decision makers. So we have really focused on keep it simple, simplify, peel it back to a one page if possible. So we try to do a one-page finance proposal, a one-page credit application, and if possible, a one-page finance document. That's not possible in all cases because there are different structures and different terms, but for the most part, we try to keep it very, very simple with a very quick process, because if you approach the customer with a no cost upfront monthly payment scenario, you got to turn that deal fast. So we're talking a 24 to 48 hour credit process. Let's get documents out to the customer, get the customer signed up. So keep that. So typically we can quote, credit approve, document, and fund a deal all within a 1 business week term. Okay, so it's not like financing a commercial real estate deal where there's reams of paper and 3 weeks just to get to a credit decision. We want to turn these deals quickly, strike when the iron is hot. And outside of LED, we've done HVAC controls, we do solar. There's really anything, CHP, building envelope projects. We've even done curtains for dairy barns. Okay, these thermal curtains that they let them down during the winter so that they retain some heat in these huge dairy barns. So nothing is really out of the question as far as what kind of technologies we'll consider financing. And the other thing I'd like to stress as a benefit is we will hold your hand and really implement and help train and help. I do customer conversations all the time where, a sales guy will throw me on the phone with a customer because I don't expect salespeople to become finance experts, because I'm certainly not going to become a lighting expert, right? I understand lumens per watt and I understand foot candles, but I'm not going to dig into, the deep water. So go ahead, Jeff. I want to make sure we keep this moving along.
Yep. Next slide.
So in general terms, the easy cheesy, keep it at 1 page, we use an equipment finance agreement. And the reason I like that in the small to medium business segment is that the customer owns it's a very short doc. Customer owns the equipment. We have a security interest in it. It's a level monthly payment. There's no buyout at the end because they already own the equipment, and they keep the depreciation, right? So they have the tax benefit of writing off the interest and the depreciation on the equipment. The typical terms on that in the small ticket space, by small ticket space, we refer to 5,000 to 150,000 bucks. That's a single page credit app. Terms are typically 3 to 5 years. It could be a little shorter, could be a little longer, especially if you're dealing with schools or other types of credits that need a little bit longer term. And the only collateral in the deal is the equipment that is being installed. So there's no lien on the building. There's no tax lien like in a PACE financing or anything like that. It's just we're trying to make this as simple as possible and treat it like a copier, a forklift, or any other piece of equipment. I find that small to medium businesses resonate with this because when they understand that we're treating this just like any other piece of business equipment that they're financing, they get it rather than doing some sort of complicated type financing. You know, and I will say that when we talk about pricing, and we can get into this in more detail, but it does depend on who the customer is, right? The smaller the business and the smaller the transaction, obviously the higher the rate's going to be for that money. But we always strive to be in the single digits, even with our small business customers. And by the way, that's very competitive compared to every other type of equipment leasing and financing out. We have the same rates and terms as if the customer was financing a forklift or a machine tool. There's no penalty just because there's no collateral value. You're never going to go repossess and remarket an LED light, but you are going to go repossess and remarket a forklift. So there is some collateral value there. The other point I'd like to make is that we can customize programs and structures for a particular partner. So example, if it's a utility that wants to have an incentive finance program as part of their incentive. In other words, let's say they have a limited amount of funds for promoting projects through rebates and have a lack of uptake because it's 5 or 10% of the project cost. It's a very nominal amount. You can redeploy those dollars into an incentive finance program and say, hey, we're doing a finance program, no down payment, 1.9% interest for 3 years, and buy that interest rate down. Or, there's a number of different ways to use an incentive finance program. Jeff, go ahead. I want to stay within our time frame here. So talking about markets, we talked about underserved markets a little bit, but we do both traditional commercial, which is small business, medium business, and large business C&I clients. We do nonprofits. Those would be churches, private schools, VFWs, YMCA, Salvation Army, those type of credits. And then in the municipal side, we typically swim on the city, county, and state government market in the smaller municipalities and entities, maybe rural, who aren't bond rated. They're not going to do a $50 million bond offering to retrofit all their campuses, for example. These are typically smaller city, county, state government entities. For example, we just did, maybe it's on here. We just did phase 2. It's not. We just did phase 2 of a lighting retrofit for the Port of Astoria up in Oregon. And Astoria is a small town. It's $165,000 deal. They're not going to go through a lot of brain damage to complete that, phase 2 of the lighting retrofit that we did. So you see on this slide some of the deals that recently were done. There's none on here that I really need to there's one I do want to comment on. we got him one of our lighting suppliers that we do business with, financing their projects, referred one of their contractor customers to us out of South Dakota about a year and a half ago, he sells LED lighting, ventilation, with the high efficiency motors and other electrical type equipment into the dairy industry. And we have done very well. It's been a high approval rate. It's been high uptake. It's, from what I understand, our type of financing is a lot less brain damage than what dairy farms typically have to go through with farm credit and, people trying to understand their business. The reason we like dairy is, and other types of production type, ag, is that it's consistent cash flow. Okay. They got to milk their cows, twice a day, every day, 365 days a year. Therefore, they have revenue every day, every week, every month, compared to crop farmers who are very seasonal. They sell their crops in the fall, early fall, and that's when they get all their income. And so that's a pretty risky, type of vertical market. But Jeff, go ahead and advance.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off what Ross said. I know a lot of our associate or our full members are, sometimes in the more rural parts of the state where there are those confined area feeding operations or CAFOs. Sometimes those folks don't always have access to your standard bank loan, or like Ross said, it's a lot of brain damage with the complexity of some of these loans, and sometimes you're talking about putting a lien on your property or having a secured loan versus an unsecured loan. And just want to point out that the CAFOs and some of the other agricultural animal operations out there are incredibly energy intensive, right? And so there's a good amount of opportunity for savings there, but sometimes those projects just don't happen because of lack of capital. And so, like Ross said, there's money coming in. Sometimes it makes a lot more sense to look at these projects in terms of what is this going to cost us per month if we finance it? What's the plus minus given what we have coming in, versus one huge lump sum buying a project outright. So I would just say to our members, keep that in mind with, kind of the commerce of our state and the way that we have some agriculture there and some of those different things. But I'll move it along here, Russ.
Sure. So about us, we, like I said, not 9 years now in financing energy. I think we understand it. We've had enough exposure to enough different types of opportunities where, whether it's a small balance PPA for a solar project, we understand the terminology, we have the funding sources, and we add value by really partnering with whoever we're partnering with to bring in other words, we act as your backroom finance company, right? So you don't really need to learn everything that we know to be able to do this. We just need to be able to kind of hold hands and go to market together. The other thing I'd like to point out is there is no recourse. So in other words, if we finance a project, there is no credit recourse to the utility or to the trade ally contractor who's delivering that project. We're taking 100% of the credit risk, and in the event of default, there is no clawback. We work closely with the folks that we partner with to develop sales and marketing strategy and how that's presented to the customer that they're comfortable with. It's not, here, you got to use my brochure. It's very, how do you want to approach your customer? What's the look and feel? Put your logo in here. A lot of folks want that arm's length kind of language in there that says, they're not providing the financing, they're partnering with someone to provide the financing, but we're very flexible on how those programs go together and how they're deployed but again, it's a side-by-side relationship. We do not need to be in between you and the customer. We can be behind whoever is proposing the deal. We can be as involved or as transparent or invisible, I should say, as that the program kind of desires. So, Jeff, I think that covers that one pretty well. I think we got through that in the allotted time, so we have time for questions. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, I'm going to make sure that I unmute everyone. I have asked all to unmute. Asked unmute. Let's see here. Sorry, give me one moment while I deal with this. Yeah, so I was going to pop in here real quick and ask a question.
Sure.
Russ, have you guys can you talk a little bit more about some of the partnerships that you guys have had with these efficiency contractor implementers, and how some of the creative ways that you could introduce a customer to financing?
Yeah, I think that's been a big challenge, to be honest with you, Jeff. I think, again, where we've had the most uptake is with folks that are willing to change the way they've traditionally approached the customer. And I would say one of the biggest introductory tools is our very simple monthly payment calculator, which you have a copy of, where our partner, they don't have to chase us for a quote. In other words, our partner can put in what the project cost is, the estimated rebates and incentives are, what the net project cost is, what the energy savings are, what the maintenance savings or HVAC load savings or whatever it is, and come up with a monthly payment. And then that spreads a 10-year cash flow summary all on a one page. It's a one-page form that, to believe it or not, Jeff, I think that our partners can get comfortable with that to the point that they can include that as a one-pager. And as far as I'm concerned, it should be the second page that the customer sees, right? Is that, hey, there's a way to do this project with no upfront cost. Here's what the numbers look like over, whatever the given term is. That's been helpful, because what I've found is that a lot of people have find the finance process very complicated. And a lot of the trade ally partners that we work with are very engineer oriented, they want to know how the clock's built versus what time it is. Yep. Sales is what time is it? It's not how the clock's built. The facilities manager wants to know how the clock's built so that he doesn't look stupid or she doesn't look stupid when the project isn't the right fit. But then on the other extreme side, we've had, especially in the lighting space, we've had some folks that once they see this and they say, oh, that's how we used to sell copiers, or that's how we used to sell, you name whatever the product. Oh, I know, the security equipment is another one. That we have one lighting partner who's a national company that they offer on every proposal, they offer no down, 2.9% financing, because they buy that interest rate down, just like they were doing with other products, right? So that no cost to the customer, an interest rate that nobody can argue with. And I would say, if he was on the call with us right now, I would say that at least prior to COVID, that was a huge, if nothing else, giving that option will push the customer to pay cash if they really don't want to finance, but they do want the project. There's no risk in offering a customer a finance option. It will actually help qualify the customer. So that's my answer to that. And I notice my former colleague Tommy Freeman is on this call because I give you a quick story on Tommy. I connected with Tommy on LinkedIn 5 years ago. Let's just say I can't remember because I'm getting old. But he was selling lighting projects in Salt Lake at Rocky Mountain Power, and he's a former. He sold office automation equipment, copiers and whatnot. And the only way that that equipment gets sold is on a lease program. So when he and I connected, he started offering our finance solutions in the Salt Lake market and just knocked it out of the park, did a great job. And if you want to unmute Tommy, Jeff, I'm sure he could give us his side of the story. But, you know, to this day, he and I have worked together and collaborated in dozens, if not, I mean, dozens and dozens of programs and partnerships. And we've had, you know, some good successes and also some disappointments. You know, we launched a lighting as a service program for a company out of Florida in 2017, 2018. And there was a lot of quotes and not a lot of closing, you know, going on. So we've had, being transparent, we've had some failures as well as some successes.
Yep, Tommy, I have pressed the ask to unmute. I think you may have to still unmute through Zoom if you wanted to chime in there. I'll give you a sec.
He's probably not even listening, Jeff.
It's all good. Well, I wanna chime in, Ross, because you brought up an incredible point there. You brought up buying down the interest rate.
Yep.
This is something at my previous job that we would do to sell projects. You know, we would go to the customer, they would come back to us and say, hey, you know, we need to hit this certain metric. Sometimes it's called their minimum internal rate of return, or they need a certain ROI on the project, or you know, they need a certain interest rate over a certain term. But one thing we were able to do, and full disclosure, when we worked at my previous company, it wasn't with Ross, it was another financing company. But this is something Ross can do is, you know, if you're trying to sell a project, you have a certain amount of profit built in there, and you know what that number is. Well, you can sacrifice some of that profit on the back end on your side to buy down the interest rate, right? To hit a certain target for the customer. And so, you know, that I am definitely not a sales guy. I was very much the person doing photometrics. You know, I know visual lighting. I'm a pro at using that software. You know, I was the nerdy engineer guy who could answer the question of the building operator, essentially.
Right.
But you know, to watch those sales guys that I worked with, you know, work their magic and be able to have all these new and different sets of levers to pull on, rather than just, hey, here's your price, we can lower it or raise it. You know, there's a lot more levers when you start talking about financing. You can talk about terms, you can talk about liability, you can talk about buying down the interest rate. You know, there's so many different ways to sell projects, and I just think it's important, you know, because at the end of the day, everybody's goal is to get projects implemented. And this is essentially a tool to make that goal happen, you know. So
looks like Tommy's microphone doesn't work, but
yeah,
you know, that's Floyd asked a question about economic development. I'm happy to have that discussion. I just need to understand what the context would be. But you know, again, in any channel, even in you know, a county, or we talked about rural, right, with dairy. I think the same holds true for Main Street. You know, there's a lot of businesses out there who would like to be more efficient and, you know, upgrade their facilities, just don't have the capital available. You can roll this out in any kind of promotional campaign that you want to, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce benefit or economic development association or whatever benefit. You know, we're happy to do that. So And
Yeah, I'm
also,
just
go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead, Ross.
No, I was just going to say if there's any other questions that pop up, well, maybe it's Floyd saying maybe Floyd's microphone doesn't work. But anyhow, uh, happy to collaborate and have discussions, after anytime after the webinar to talk about, individual ideas, or, I'm always open to, marketing and how we can expand the market, because there's still underserved potential customers. And here's the other thing, Jeff. Tommy and I actually had one of these happen. We gave a project away in North Carolina, because a lot of these customers have already had lighting audits done. I'll tell you what a utility ought to do, Jeff. They ought to go back 12 to 18 months on all of the audits that were done that were good from a savings standpoint that the customer didn't implement. And we should go back to those customers with a no down payment, 29 bucks a month, cash flow positive offer, because maybe the problem was they just didn't want to write a check.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's entirely a great idea. If I were, if it were me, like, let's say, for example, if I were in charge of a city's economic development, the thing that I would try to pursue is to say, hey, the city is going to offer, instead of, just rebates for a project, maybe what we do is we buy down the interest rate 1%, and we brand it as, hey, this is the city of, let's say Smith, Iowa, our low interest financing program through the city, and brand it that way. Is that something that you guys do, Ross?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's as long as there's an interest and a desire, we can really, we got to make sure that our banks get the yield that they need. But
Sure.
remember, all of this, actual cost of product, installation, contractors' margins, profit, cost of capital, all that should be rolled into one ball. So that and the test should be if the monthly payment over 5 years compared to the savings is cash flow positive, that's a good offer for the customer. So positioning that perceived interest rate is important, especially with small business owners who are also consumers, and they may not understand that what they get for a rate on their home mortgage is not the same as an unsecured equipment
Exactly.
finance. And
Yep.
I don't know if Tommy, if you're back on the call, if you want to unmute, I kind of did the setup with Jeff where you and I connected when you were selling projects in Salt Lake, and your previous background selling office automation. If you could kind of give a little experience of when you first started using this finance product, I think people would like to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I apologize. I became unavailable for a minute there once you were asking me, but yeah, once Ross and I connected, and I was so in tune with, like he said, I came from the office equipment world where everything is sold on payment, and it's, hey, if we can reduce your payment by, hang on one second, got a little guy coming in.
It's all right, Tommy. We definitely know how that is. I was meeting with Ross the other day, and we got interrupted by my cat, which our cats look incredibly similar, apparently.
Oh, he found a whistle, and now that's all I can talk about right now. So, yeah, this is the reality today, right? But yeah, once I kind of grasped onto the concept of cash flow positive savings, and taking away the biggest objection up front, which was, yeah, this all sounds great. You're going to save me X number of thousands of dollars over the years, but I don't have $100,000 or 150,000 to pay for this. So up until I met Ross, I didn't even realize that was even an option, right? That we could finance these projects. And once we started kind of approaching all sales that way, to where that's how we opened all the doors. We led with the idea of, hey, I know you've probably had a million lighting audits and people have proposed XYZ, the best ROIs or whatever it might be, but we're actually not going to charge you anything up front, and it's going to be saving you money day one. Well, how does that work? And it was just, you kind of flipped the script a little bit. It opened up so many opportunities. And at the end of the day, at least open the door to at least start the conversation with the building owner or the business owner about doing the retrofit and taking that biggest weight off of their shoulders of, man, I got to write a big check for lighting. Like, come on, I don't want to do that. And now they, spinning it to where they can use that money elsewhere in their business, whether it's marketing or sales or whatever it might be. And then, if at the end of the day, they decided that, what, this is all great. I'm glad we talked about it, but we actually have the budget to do it. We're just going to write a check. Great. Then they want to write a check. No problem. But trying to save a deal with financing after you've already proposed it as a cash and kind of coming back to them with a financing option, almost never saved a deal. It was like, no, we already made up our mind. We're just going to kind of wait until next year or whatever. So hopefully that helps. Just,
Yep.
Leading with the easiest way for a customer to say yes is no money up front, cash flow positive. That's the easiest way for them to say yes.
Yeah, that's really good insight, Tommy. I'm glad you hopped on this meeting. I'll offer too, just quickly, my previous job, well, like I said, was compressed air audits, selling lighting projects. Every lighting project that we sold had financing terms on our one-page agreement, our one-page project proposal. Every single one, even if we knew that there was 100% chance they were not doing financing, there's something about putting things in terms of cash flow that like activates a different gear in the customer's mind, in my opinion. I would also say, just as an anecdote, for almost all projects where the operating hours were 4,000 hours a year or greater for lighting projects, we were able to get them cash flow positive with terms between 3 and 5 years. So
Yeah.
It's really not rocket science.
And Jeff, real quick, just to add on to that, other way of framing this up is the life of the equipment and the overall benefit that you get from the life of the equipment is, let's just say that their 10-year savings, if they were to pay cash, was $100,000. And then if they financed it over 5 years, they're only giving up about $5,000 or so of savings to be able to finance it. So it's like a small percentage over the life of the equipment to use financing up front versus paying capital. So kind of just showing them that life of the equipment cash flow expectancy as well.
It's a really good point. We would do that as well. Say, hey, your expected useful life of your lighting, your LEDs is 13 years according to so-and-so TRM. Here's the lifetime of the project cash flow, net cash flow. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. And like I said, financing is just it's another tool in your tool bag. And, if you're a municipality looking to offer an innovative way to encourage some more projects or more savings, I would encourage you to look at something like this.
Yes, and as a municipal utility, a lot of the time they don't have they can't have a Clear Result or Franklin Energy or somebody like that managing their program. So this can be something that is a value added to their customers who are interested in doing this, but don't necessarily have the program facilitation that some of the larger utilities have.
Absolutely. It's a great point. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. I believe everyone else has. I'll just go ahead and prompt everyone to unmute again if they want. If you have any questions, feel free to speak up now or throw them in the chat.
Well, we must have done a good job, Jeff.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. I really appreciate you being here with us, Ross. To everyone who's on this meeting or who may be watching the recording afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. My email is jgorrie@iamu.org. If you want to ask any questions, I can send those to Ross. And just for the record, I will also put on Ross's contact info here, just in case you didn't see it earlier. Yeah, like I said, Ross is an associate member, and he's been in the space for a long time. And I think he's got a lot of wisdom to help people out when it comes to financing. And, just really appreciate your time today, Ross. Thank you. Thank you for doing
my
this.
pleasure. And Floyd, I did see your message there, and I will send you an email, and we'll set up a call to discuss that. So thanks very much, Jeff. Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone attending.
All righty.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys, for being here. Take care.
Bye.